So, dear students, today we shall start a new chapter, Cell, the unit of life. So, the whole chapter is there for the examination. When we look around us, you can see both living and non-living things. What is the difference between the living things and non-living things? If we examine carefully, the living things have the basic unit of life. The basic unit of life means the cell. All living organisms contain cell or cells. But non-living things or inanimate things does not contain the cell. This is the major one of the difference. Okay. Now, cell, the unit of life, as just we have seen, all organisms are made up of cells. All organisms means both the plants and the animals are made up of cells. Okay. The unicellular organisms are made up of only one cell or single cell. That is, some organisms are made up of a single cell, and these are called unicellular organisms. Whereas the other organisms made up of many cells, these are called multicellular organisms. It means there are two types of organisms, unicellular and multicellular organisms. Then, what is a cell, or how to define cell? So that's also very important. The cell organisms with cellular organizations exist independently and perform functions of life. But below organization of the cell cannot perform the independent existence. Independent existence very important. Cellular organisms exhibit or exist, you can say, not exhibit, exist independently and perform functions of life. Perform functions of life means all the activities of the cell takes place in the cell itself. That is metabolic activities. Suppose less than one cell does not have an independent existence. That means less than complete structure of a cell does not have independent existence. It means cell can exist independently, but less than cell organization cannot exist. A very important fact. Then, how to define cell? Very important thing. A cell is the fundamental, structural, and functional unit of all living organisms or life. What is cell? Cell is the fundamental unit of living organisms. What is the meaning of this? Fundamental unit means all living organisms contain the cell. That is the fundamental one. Structural unit. The living organisms have structure. The structural, the basic unit is the cell. ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವೊಂದು ಮನೆ ಕಟ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಗೋಡೆ ಕಟ್ತೀವಿ. ದ ಬ್ರಿಕ್ ಇಸ್ ದಿ ಫಂಡಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಯೂನಿಟ್. ಇಟೇ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಎಷ್ಟು ಬೇಕಾದರೂ ನಾವು ಗೋಡೆನ ಕಟ್ಬೋದು, ಮನೆ ಕಟ್ಬೋದು. ಆ ಥರ ಸೆಲ್ ಇದ್ದ ಆರ್ಗ್ಯಾನಿಸಮ್ಸು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. So cell is the fundamental structural unit of life. Not only the structural unit of life, functional unit of life also. How it is the functional unit of life? Functional unit means all living organism shows metabolic activities. These metabolic activities takes place only in the cell. Maybe respiration, excretion, digestion, like that. So all the functions takes place in the cell. Okay. So once again, cell is the fundamental, structural and functional unit of all living organisms. Okay. Then, who observed the cell? Anton Leeuwenhoek first observed the cell and described the cell. Who observed? Anton Leeuwenhoek. An important word for 1 mark. So later on, the nucleus, a structure within the cell, was discovered by another fellow, Robert Brown. So Robert Brown discovered the nucleus. It is all possible because of the invention of microscope. It is because of the invention of microscope and another important one, the electron microscope, made easy to study the details of the cell or structure of the cell. Cell theory. In 1838, Shelidan, a German botanist, studied the plants. At the same time, T. Shawn, 1839, a British zoologist, studied the animals. They said both plants and animals are made up of cells. And also said these cells covered with plasma membrane or the cell membrane. A very important point. And they also said the plant cells have one more layer outside the cell membrane called cell wall. Okay. Cell theory. Who proposed the cell theory? For 1 mark. As I already told you, M. Shelidan and T. Shawn proposed the cell theory in 1838-39. Later on, Rudolf Virchow explained that cells divide and form new cells from the pre-existing cells. Omnis cellula is cellula. What is the meaning of this omnis cellula is cellula? Cells divide and produce new cells. It means a cell can divide and produce new cell. But from the pre-existing cell, that is very important. ಮೊದಲೇ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಸೆಲ್ಲಿನಿಂದ ಮತ್ತೆ 2 ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಅವನು ಹೇಳ್ದ. Who told this one? Rudolf Virchow. According to cell theory, or what it states, you can say. According to cell theory, all living organisms are composed of cells and products of cells. Second point, all cells arise from pre-existing cells. These two are very important points or concepts of cell theory. All living organisms are composed of cells means all living organisms are made up of cells. And the product of cells means these cells divide and produce the daughter cells. Thus, organisms are made up of cells. That is the concept. Then, all cells arise. How the cell come into existence means the cell arise because of pre-existing cells. Cells ಮೊದಲೇ ಇತ್ತು, ಡಿವೈಡ್ ಆಗಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಬಂತು. ಸೊ ಇದನ್ನು ಪ್ರಪೋಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು ಶೆಲಿಡಾನ್ ಮತ್ತು ಶಾನ್ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥವರು. ಓಕೆ, ನಾವು we shall see an overall view of cell. Overall view of cell. Study of onion cells in plants and cheek cells in animals. How we can study the onion cell or the cheek cell means with the help of an instrument, microscope. With the help of microscope, one can study the cell, the structure of cell to some extent. So the study of onion cells under the compound microscope have shown that the onion cells are rectangular in shape. These cells contain the outermost boundary, the cell wall. Next to the cell wall, one more layer is present called the plasma membrane. The plasma membrane is also called cell membrane. Thus, the plant onion cell shows 2 layers, outer cell wall and inner plasma membrane. But when we observe the cheek cells of human being, you can say now, cheek cells have only cell membrane. What about cell wall? It's not found. The animal cell, human cell, cheek cells shows only the cell membrane. It means cell wall is absent. Inside this cell membrane, the living substance, cytoplasm is present. The cytoplasm contains many cell organelles. In addition to that, the cell shows at the center small spherical shaped structure called nucleus. The nucleus contains what is known as chromosomes. Chromosomes in turn contain the DNA. DNA means deoxyribonucleic acid. So very important points. Plant cells have cell wall and cell membrane, whereas the animal cell consists of only cell membrane. The cell wall is absent. This is one of the most important difference between plant cell and animal cell. Note this point, a very important, fundamental point. Okay, now, I told you, after the discovery of electron microscope, it is possible to study the detailed structure of the cell. Okay. After the discovery of electron microscope, two types of cells were discovered. One is prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell. Very important. Prokaryotic cell, you must know the meaning of prokaryotic cell. The cell without nuclear membrane. That is, nucleus is not covered with a membrane. Only chromatin is present. Such a cell is called prokaryotic cell. Cells which contain nucleus, in which nuclear membrane is absent. Example, the primitive organisms like bacteria, blue-green algae. Next, eukaryotic cell. Eukaryotic cell is a type of cell in which the nucleus or the nuclei is surrounded by a membrane, nuclear membrane. And also contains cell organelles. Such type of cells are called eukaryotic cells. It means based on the electron microscope, we are able to classify the cell into two types, prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell. Based on this, the whole organism or the living world is classified into two types, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. This is possible only after the discovery of electron microscope. Okay, before the invention of electron microscope, this classification was not found. Now, the cell contain or the cell membrane inside contain, you can say, a semi-fluid matrix called the cytoplasm. Within the cytoplasm, all the cellular activities takes place. Activities means metabolic activities, physiological functions which takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. Say, respiration. The respiration takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. In case of animal cell, the excretion takes place. Even the digestion also takes place within the nucleus. That is, the metabolic activities takes place in the cytoplasm of this cell. Metabolic activities, during these activities, chemical reactions occur. Because of the chemical reactions in the cell keep or in a living state. How a cell can be kept in the living state means it is because of the cellular activities. Okay, this is general concept. Eukaryotic cells contain membrane-bound structures, means organelles. The cytoplasm contains many cell organelles like endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi body or Golgi complex, lysosomes, mitochondria, microbodies, and vacuoles. Okay. So the cytoplasm contains membrane-bound structures, means membrane-bound cell organelles. The eukaryotic cell consists of eukaryotic type of nucleus and membrane-bound cell organelles like endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi complex, mitochondria, etc. In case of plant cell, plastids. What about prokaryotic cell? The prokaryotic cells contain only prokaryotic type of nucleus, but the cell organelles are absent. The cell organelles like Golgi complex, endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, in case of plant, plastids are absent. Okay, that note the difference also. But the ribosomes are present. The ribosomes are non-membrane bound organelles. Very important. The ribosomes are found both in prokaryotes and eukaryotes. But they are non-membrane bound organelle. ಪ್ರೊಕ್ಯಾರಿಯೋಟ್ಸ್ನಲ್ಲೂ ಇದೆ, ಯೂಕ್ಯಾರಿಯೋಟ್ಸ್ನಲ್ಲೂ ಇದೆ. ಆದರೆ in eukaryotes, ribosomes are found in two cell organelles in addition to the cytoplasm of the cell. That is mitochondria, chloroplasts in plants. Okay. The animal cell, in addition to these cell organelles, contain centriole, another non-membrane organelle, which helps in cell division. The animal cell contains centriole, which is absent in plant cell. Okay, that's also very important point. Now, coming to the size, shape of the cell, this cell size varies. Even the shape of the cell also varies. So there is a diagram showing different shapes of the cells. You can see red blood cells. You can see white blood cells. You can see some epithelial cells. At the same time, you can see the nerve cell with branches, a trachid cell, elongated cell you can see. The cells of the leaves, you can see mesophyll cells with chloroplast. In all these cases, the shape different. It means the shape of the cell varies. That's very important point. The size of the cell varies. The shape of the cell also varies. We have seen the mycoplasma are the smallest cells, measure about 0.3 microns in length. The bacterial cell measures about 3 to 5 microns. the Mycoplasma gallisepticum, the smallest cell, you can say. For 1 mark question. At the same time, the biggest or the largest cell is the ostrich's egg. Ostrich, the egg cell, which is single cell, actually, the biggest cell. What about human RBC? Human RBC measures about 7 microns in diameter. That is the smallest and the largest. And even the human RBCs. What about the longest cell? The longest cell is the nerve cell. The nerve cell is the longest cell. Okay. So that's all about this video. In the next video, we shall see the prokaryotic cells. Thank you.